morning at 6 or 6:30.
It's a great day to be a Kiwanian. Kids need Kiwanis, and Kiwanis needs you. Thank you for coming today. I'm so happy to see this group here on this beautiful Friday. So if we can begin by saying our defining statement. Kiwanis is a global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world, one child, one community at a time. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
America the beautiful. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of rain,
for purple mountain majesties, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Please bow your heads. We thank you, dear God, for this day, for its blessings, its opportunities, its challenges. May we appreciate that whatever comes our way, when we turn to you, you will show us the way. And when we are called upon to help another in need, you will provide. We pray for your strength and guidance for each day's duties and problems. May we be challenged to always give our best and be assured of your presence in all of our service. Now bless this food for the nourishment and strength of our bodies. Amen.
We're very pleased to have today as our guests members of Kirby's family and special friends. And I'd like to introduce them now if you're able. I know you are. I've already seen you stand up. His wife, Charlotte Kirby, daughter, Courtney Kirby, and special friends, Cheryl Frizzell and Farron Frizzell. Let's welcome them.
Welcome. Do we have any other guests today?
Thank you. I wanted you to all meet, after she powders her nose, Callie Coley, who is a paralegal with the firm, and she teaches me something new about estate administration every day.
Okay, welcome. Next, we are going to go through the announcements. Grady Jackson needs some help with a house committee, and so he has members, but they have had surgery. So Grady, if you'll stand up, we need someone that is willing to help with setup and breakdown, and someone willing to help with taking the food after the meeting. You don't have to do it every week. More hands make lighter work, and you could each take a 1 week a month. Who is willing to raise their hand to meet with Grady after the meeting? Thank you, Gary. So Grady, you've got Gary. Who else can maybe help serve on that committee? And Joy. So we've got 2 members. Thank you. And Partner Read is happening at Poe Elementary. If you want to participate in reading with a student on Friday mornings from 8:30 to 9:05, please contact Bob Goodell or Clay Taylor. Clay, will you raise your hand? Thank you very much. We also will begin serving at the Salvation Army the 4th Friday of the month. So if you're willing to serve a meal at the Salvation Army for those that are in need of shelter and food, please contact Cricket Herald. And when I talk to Cricket next week, if I hadn't, I'm gonna ask people to raise their hands again so we can get some names down to help serve. Also, on December 3rd, we have the bell ringing. All of the slots have been filled except the 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. slot. Keep that in the back of your mind. If you're able to serve in December on the 3rd, it's a Saturday, please let Cricket Herald know that as well. I do want to remind you, we have a new member joining today. Their apron is in the back of the room beside Rocky. Rocky, will you raise your hand? So on your way out, please take a minute to sign the apron.
It's my honor to welcome Scott Pius to the Kiwanis Club. He was born in 1945, the second of 9 children. He graduated from LSU in 69 and 68 and received his JD in 73. He was in private practice until last year. He served in the Army at Fort Sill and in Vietnam, where he was with the infantry as an artillery observer. He received a Bronze Star Medal with the device, and he can explain that to you, in a first oak leaf cluster. He married Kathleen in 1968, and they have 3 children. Lana, who was in our action club, you may have met him working at the pancake breakfast. Erie, who was with the EPA, and Stacy, who will be moving to Raleigh, looking a job. Scott moved from Louisiana recently. In Louisiana, he and Kathleen were heavily involved in nonprofits to help the handicapped, those with special needs. One was Carcincy. They now have a $5 million budget per year to help mentally handicapped. Scott was past president of NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. During his tenure, they built a 26-unit apartment building for the handicapped. In his spare time, how do you have spare time?
Hang around with you.
He builds and flies an experimental 2-seater airplane and woodworking, specializing in bolt turning. Welcome, Scott Pius.
Thank you, Robert. One of the best ways to share our passion for Kiwanis and commitment to the community is to welcome new members into our club. So Scott, we are very pleased that you have chosen to be a part of our community. So the vision of Kiwanis is to have a positive influence in communities worldwide, so that one day all children will wake up in communities that believe in them, nurture them, and provide the support that they need to thrive. Scott, having indicated a desire to become an active member of our club, having been approved by our board as a member, having gone through the club orientation, do you agree to embrace the vision of our club and Kiwanis organization?
Yes, ma'am.
We welcome you to this global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world, one child and one community at a time. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, thank you, Stacy. We thought this would be easier to do, so I didn't have to come up here twice, do membership welfare, and go right into our speaker. Membership welfare items today that we know about. Mac Jenkins, Leslie Jones, and Frank Crawley are all recovering from surgery, so let's remember them in our thoughts and prayers. Please give them your phone calls or visit them, drop them a card, let them know we're thinking about them. Do we have any other membership welfare items? Great, thank you so much, Charlie. Wheelis, getting much better. Anybody else have a membership welfare item? We'll keep all of our members in your thoughts and prayers, and we hope to have all of them back very soon. Now let's move into our speaker today. We're very delighted to have not only an interesting speaker, but a speaker that does a very important job in North Carolina. Our speaker is Lynn Minges. Lynn is the president and the CEO of the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association. She promotes the diverse interest of North Carolina's hospitality industry that represents $27 billion in annual sales and involves 11% of the state's workforce. She is currently chair of the International Society of Hotel Associations. She serves on the board of directors of the National Restaurant Association, the American Hotel and Lodging Association, the North Carolina Travel and Tourism Board, and the North Carolina Travel and Tourism Coalition. She has chaired both the National Council of State Tourism Directors and Travel South USA. Prior to her current role, and this is where I met her, she was Deputy Secretary for the North Carolina Department of Commerce, where she oversaw the marketing area of the state's business as a business location and also as a destination for filmmaking, tourism, and sports development in the state. She has been recognized by the Triangle Business Journal with their Outstanding Women in Business Award, as she was named Career Woman of the Year by Business and Professional Women in North Carolina. Lynn is a native of Bladen County. She graduated from Peace College and North Carolina State University. She and her husband live in Raleigh, and I had to get an update on this. When I first met her, she had 2 little girls. Now she's got 2 grown daughters, and I hate to admit this, 4 grandchildren. Please welcome Lynn Minges.
It was so good to be with you, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to get to reconnect with several that I have known through the years. Buck, one of those, Phil Kirk, one of those, Alice Garland, one of those, and I could go round and round. I think when you work long enough and you're out and about, you just collect lots of people who matter in your life, and so it's great to reconnect with several of you today. I want to talk to you a little bit about the hospitality industry in North Carolina, about what we do, and I'm particularly going to focus on COVID because COVID has been, the pandemic hit our industry pretty hard, and we're still struggling despite what some may believe. We represent the interest at the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association of about 20,000 food service establishments all across North Carolina and about 2,000 hotel properties. To give you a glimpse at, kind of what happened in terms of employment, I almost cringed a little bit when Buck said 11% of our state's workforce. That's probably true again today, but we really saw a fall off during COVID. I remember on March 17th, remember that day vividly, it will stay in my mind forever. I've been talking with the governor's office for about 2 weeks, kind of leading up to that day, and knew that, COVID cases were rising and that the situation was getting worse, daily briefings with him, with Dr. Mandy Cohen, and that they were going to take some serious action. And we were very much a part of kind of understanding what that might be and we knew in advance what was coming. And so in fact, I received the call that morning that they were going to shut restaurants at 5 o'clock that afternoon. March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. A lot of those restaurants were, expecting a big crowd coming in, people coming in to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. And so their refrigerators were full and they were stocked for, with wings and beer and all the kinds of things that people enjoy on that night. And they were forced to shut their doors at 5 o'clock. And for the next 8 weeks, there was nowhere in North Carolina you could go in and be served a meal. Restaurants were shut down. And you might imagine my phone began to ring, and it continued to ring nearly, I shouldn't say 24 hours a day, but it was the roughest few weeks I've ever lived through. Restaurateurs were watching their life savings going away, and certainly that depends. I mean, there are big restaurants who, weathered the storm a little bit better, but some smaller business owners did not. And, there were a lot of mental health issues through that. I mean, people were losing everything they had for 8 weeks. And these are oftentimes small business owners who, who operate on a margin, a very thin margin, and don't have a lot of, reserves to weather things like this. They were laying off employees. And so I tell you that long story to say that on one day, we displaced about 250,000 workers, people in our industry who were employed in the industry, many of them, hourly wage earners, who suddenly didn't have a paycheck that they were expecting at the end of the week and didn't have money to put gas in their car or feed their families or keep their lights on. And so it was a pretty dark day. I remember it really, really well. Let me go back just a minute to say, we're seeing that employment come back, but as I go through the conversation here today, you will see that we continue to be plagued with employment issues that are having really devastating impacts on our business even today. We look at, on the hotel side, they were never closed down, but there were no college events, there were no concerts, there were none of the kinds of things that drive There were no conventions, there were no meetings, even in a big ballroom like we're looking at right now. You know how many people could be in that ballroom? 10 people, that's it. And you wore masks and you had to be 10 feet apart. I sat in some meetings like that during COVID. It was, it was pretty bad. And so we saw occupancy rates decline. Even today, that business isn't really back where it was before. We can talk about that a bit. So you remember the restrictions, the capacity restrictions, the mask mandates, the gathering mandates, outdoor dining, all these kinds of things we had to negotiate and navigate through. And I will tell you that before the governor would stand and make a proclamation, there were many, many hours of conversation trying to negotiate and advocate on behalf of business owners. You can have a mask mandate when we finally knew that was coming, but don't put the responsibility on a business owner. We are not responsible. Whoa, somebody's got to be, it's not us. Put a sign on the door, we've met the test. So we were able to negotiate a whole lot of those kind of things. It was better in our state than it was in other states. It was still really, really bad. But when all this happened, sometimes our industry, I think, gets a bad rap, but I will tell you candidly that the thing that our business owners were most concerned about were those workers that they were sending home. And so, March 17th, 18th, 19th, in those days and through that weekend, the thing that I did, the thing they wanted me to focus on was creating a nonprofit that would collect and disperse funds for these workers that we were displacing. Now, I don't know if you remember this. I do. It's all imprinted in my life. But these workers were being sent home, and remember our unemployment system. What a mess it was. Get all those workers applying for unemployment, and it was weeks until the first check came. If you're an hourly wage earner, you can't wait. You don't have money to float 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And so we set up a fund, a worker relief fund, and raised about $1.5 million from corporations. We did this in 3 days, had it up and running. And our workers that were being displaced could apply for funding, and we dispersed about $1.5 million to workers in the industry in the amount of, it was $500 each, but it got some of them through the curve. So we did that. We're proud of that, and that was the most important thing I think we did early on. I can talk about other things we did, but throughout it, really just negotiating on every executive order and trying to make sure that, would the tables be 8 feet apart or 6 feet apart? Six is better, and we kind of had to explain and advocate for that. We worked with our members to help them navigate all the many complicated government programs that were coming their ways, like EDL, PPP, ERTC. How does that work? How do I get at that? And we had people on our team, some of them funded through the Economic Development Administration, that helped businesses to navigate all of that. And the media. I put this up only to say, I was doing, a large part of my job is to be the liaison to talk on behalf of the industry to the media. And this is the part of my job I like the least. But we were doing radio, TV, newspaper, magazine interviews all day, every day, to try to help the media understand and the public to understand the impact this was having on business owners, so that hopefully when we came through it, we would have the wind at our back in terms of asking for some pretty important relief. So what did we do? We got the industry together and we wrote a blueprint for revival of the hospitality industry. The legislature was coming back into session in January 2021, and we knew we had to go to them with a big, bold ask, and we had to make the case. And so we developed a pretty comprehensive 20-page blueprint that outlined the impact that COVID has had on our industry, on our workforce, on businesses, and we made several specific policy asks of legislators. And at first, as you might imagine, it was tough, but they had some American Rescue Plan funds, and we just worked the General Assembly the whole time they were in session and came away with what I know to be the most aggressive support for businesses, particularly hospitality businesses in America. Really proud of that in the work that we got done. Early in session, we got some things done through an ABC omnibus reform bill, things like outdoor dining. That was a really hard thing to get done. When you couldn't eat inside a restaurant, we had to expand the footprint of restaurants beyond what they were currently permitted to serve alcohol in. And so that was a really big, it sounds like a small thing, it was a really, really complicated thing that we worked on. We're able to get that permanent. Social districts, you all have heard about those, the ability to take alcohol out of a business and into a designated area on the streets or on the sidewalks. That was a good thing, to allow people to have a drink while they waited for their table, because tables couldn't serve at full capacity. Several other things we were able to get done in ABC reform, but a lot of our wins came with the end of the budget in 2021, and that was that we were able to get a hospitality business recovery grant program put in place. full PPP deductibility, people that got payroll protection funds, we're going to have to pay state taxes on that. We were able to get that changed so that they did not. Not an easy thing to get done. We got $5 million to help rebuild our workforce, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and some other funding. And so let me talk a little bit about the Business Recovery Grant Program, and I know just watch me, Buck, don't let me go over here. So on the Business Recovery Grant Program, we made the case in that Blueprint for Revival that our industry lost $5 billion during the 1 year of COVID. So if you looked at a period of time from March 17th to a year later, in that window of time, we lost $5 billion. Now, the way we calculated that is we said, we know how much sales are in restaurants and hotels because they pay sales tax. So we didn't want our members to have to apply for this. The Department of Revenue has that number. They know that ABC Restaurant has this amount of sales year prior, and then they know what they had during the covered COVID period. And we wrote this legislation so that we knew it was $5 billion was the money we needed. So we asked for $500 million, and darned if we didn't get it. The legislature stepped up and gave us, or allocated, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. They allocated $500 million to businesses that had been impacted by COVID. And the way the program worked is, it was largely a carve out. Most of it was for restaurants and hotels. There were a few other businesses that benefited, but largely the legislation was directed at restaurants and hotels. 300 million went out in the first wave to about 3,400 businesses. And then, because all of our members, the folks we represented had applied, that were going to apply, the eligibility was expanded, and some other businesses received funding just this summer. So we're proud of that. That Business Recovery Grant Program is the largest in our nation to date. There is no other state that has gotten anything like we've gotten, but it was a big help. And it awarded those businesses, if they were down by 20% during the covered COVID period, they got a check for 10% of their losses. So it was very helpful. But how are we doing today? People ask me that all the time, and we're still challenged. A lot of those challenges are related to workforce. We laid off half our workforce, and those people went and found jobs other places. So either we've got to recruit them back, or we've got to create a new supply chain of workers to fill the many jobs in our industry. We're still down, according to the North Carolina Department of Commerce, we're still down about 40,000 jobs over what we need today to just run our businesses. So it's a big lift to get those people back. Without workers, it's having a whole lot of impact. Businesses are restricting their operations. So if you call a restaurant to get a reservation for this weekend, the chances are they're going to tell you they're full. It is not that they're working at 100% capacity. It's just that they can only service X number of tables. Many of them are working at half capacity still today. I will tell you that right here in Raleigh, there are hotels that are taking 100 rooms out of inventory because they can't service them. So our industry is not back. Now, if you look at sales, gross sales, we look like we did in 2019. So, it's easy to say we're back, but we're not back. If you take a hotel that takes 100 rooms out of inventory, and they have demand, and they do have demand, they just can't sell that many rooms because they can't service that rooms. And so, they're making up with it by increasing prices. There's inflation, and people are willing to pay higher prices for things, but the industry is still struggling with all of that. And so, many business owners are, concerned about this. They also face supply chain disruptions. I've been out around the state in town halls, meeting with many of them through some of our work, and they're pretty frustrated. The refrigerator breaks, and they call to get a part to fix the refrigerator. It used to take an afternoon to get somebody in to repair it. Today, they might not be able to get the part. So what do? They can't even get new refrigerators to fill the ones they've got. So it's just on and on and on and on the problems that they're facing. But one of the things we're doing is, in addition to the grant money that we got for our industry, we did get through an appropriation through the legislature, $5 million to help rebuild our hospitality workforce. So we're currently in the process of investing those dollars. We also have a grant through the Economic Development Administration to train a workforce, new workforce, so that offsets the cost that businesses would have to pay. Got $1.1 million to do that. So with the $5 million campaign, what we're currently doing is we're out in the field gathering some research. So we have talked with business owners, 400 of them in facilitated sessions, trying to learn about their recruitment challenges. What's working, what's not working, what are you doing, where are you finding success? They're telling us people won't even apply for jobs. When they apply, they won't come in for an interview. They don't answer the phone. They come and they work a week and they quit. And this isn't Lynn saying this or a business owner anecdotally telling you this. We have a very detailed report, business owner after business owner telling us these same things. We did sessions around the state, facilitated sessions in all these locations, and there are some themes that are a little bit different based on where we did the session, but largely they're all facing some pretty big issues. The second part of the research we're doing is really fascinating. We're in the field right now with this, with Sinclair Public Affairs and Fallon Research. They do a lot of public opinion polling, and they are currently doing surveys and focus groups with existing employees in the industry. What do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? What would you change? How long do you see yourself here? How did you find your job? Would you tell a friend to come and take this job? Trying to learn more about those employees as well as former employees, where they went and what their perceptions were and what it might take to get those back. So we hope to take all this research together and roll that out in a recruitment campaign in 2023 to hopefully rebuild the image of the industry, talk about the value proposition and some of the things that our industry provides to people who are looking for careers in hospitality. The second program we're currently working on is the training program that I mentioned, $1.1 million, really focused on career and technical education programs in high schools, work at the community college, entry and re-entry, Goodwill, former substance abusers, people coming out of prisons. We'll take those people, and we have money to train them. And then professional advancement. You may be a housekeeper in a hotel today, but you could become, with some training, a general manager of a hotel. We have that training available to them through programs like this. I'll just transition and wrap quickly so I can take just a moment of questions if you have some, and I hear that you may. We are very much focused on the upcoming election. I mentioned that we've had some great success and great partners during COVID and beyond, and so we are very focused on the upcoming elections to make sure that people, candidates who have been with us during COVID and are always with us, return to their seats. We are heavily engaged in political advocacy at all levels, and part of my job is to harness that collective power of our industry and to engage through Political Action Committee, through an IEA, Independent Expenditure Account, and we're really proud of the work that we've done on that end. So with that, I will wrap and take any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
What are the changes that you see COVID has wrought that will be the new normal and be permanent?
Interesting question. Some of those changes were probably beginning to happen anyway. Technology. You know, I remember pre-COVID, I used to hate having to go in and pull up my menu for a restaurant on the phone. Today, that's pretty commonplace. Electronic payment. So technologies. Checking in a hotel room with a key on your phone. I was just out at the Outer Banks, and almost all the hotels there on the Outer Banks, this was new to me, they don't even have a front desk agent anymore. You go up and talk to a kiosk, and that checks you in. There are no people when you enter the hotel. With that are coming, not surprisingly, a lot of complaints, a lot of feedback from guests. I was talking with Marriott just recently, and they say that the guest service, the feedback, customer satisfaction scores are the lowest they've ever been. A lot of that is they don't have workers to train people, you know, to greet people, and so we're seeing some of that, less than the level of service we'd like to provide. We're seeing a lot of restaurants reinvent themselves. You know, they're doing a lot more counter service, even a nicer, you know, finer dining experience. You order at a counter and then they bring that to you. So shifting their models. We're seeing a lot of migration from urban areas, which is something I think we need to all think about, from downtown Raleigh to Knightdale, Wendell, you know, to all around Wake County, for example. That's happening all over the state. If you go downtown Raleigh today, not today, it's Friday, you can probably find lunch today. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, not so much. It's really hard. And it's not that those restaurants don't want to be open, it's that they don't have enough workers to service all those shifts. And so they're choosing to close. Shorter hours of operation. I mentioned taking inventory, just scaling back. Shorter menus. You used to have 25, 30 items on a menu. Which of these 10 things do you want tonight? So those are just some of the things. Yes?
I think you answered my question.
Because I ramble a little bit too much.
Well, I haven't even asked it yet, but I was going to get you to weigh in on the urban areas versus the rural areas. And as hospitality, restaurants reopen, is everything kind of moving urban, or are we going to, or is there an effort to get some of the rural areas business going, or is that just not going to happen?
I really think that some of that is moving rural. I do think that we're seeing a lot of the, you look at, many of the chefs that were downtown are now opening in Nightdale, Wendell, outside. So I think we're seeing that. But why? It's because people are working from home. And so they get off work, they got to have a drink, go have dinner. They live in Wendell and Nightdale and Zebulon. They don't always necessarily live in downtown Raleigh. And so that's where the business is. I think the biggest challenge we are facing right now in North Carolina is the fact that many of these high-rise businesses, office buildings, seen it in Uptown Charlotte, are not requiring their workers to come back to work. And that means they're not people who eat out at lunch. They're not people who grab a cup of coffee in the morning. And that is really having an impact. Yes. This is going to be a hard question. He's asking you.
No. I grilled her when she was sitting here. I'll leave you, none of those questions, you answered those. I remember during part of the COVID, there was a provision, I guess, in the restaurant or bar industry where you could get a liquor drink to go.
Yes. Yes.
Was that a temporary thing, or is that ongoing?
It was a temporary thing. We'd love to make it permanent. Again, we fight on alcohol laws in this state, and I'll just leave it at that. It's part of the conversation we had. We would like to, the restaurants make a lot of money on alcohol. So what was happening when they couldn't serve, they lost all that revenue. So you go get a taco from, my buddy, Cantina 18, Jason Smith, you get a taco plate, it's not so much, but he could sell you the margarita, and that was double the cost of your ticket for, you and your wife. And so what we wanted to do was be able to give him the ability to give you that cocktail to go. So we did get that through executive order during COVID. We worked hard this past session to try to get that made permanent. Many states did, not here in North Carolina, so not permanent yet. And let me just say, one of the obstacles was can you do it so you're not driving down the road drinking your margarita? Yes, 40 other states are doing it. They're putting them in the zip tie bags, like you get a kid's juice box. They're putting them in that. There's ways to secure them so that they are just as safe as the beer and the wine and everything else the liquor that you transport from the store. You can tell if a seal's broken. Could be done, but not here in North Carolina. Yes, sir.
What's your organization's position on the minimum wage?
That is a really good question. So, pre-COVID, when there was discussion about raising the minimum wage, our position was, I don't have any media here, I guess it doesn't matter. Well, we sort of publicly were neutral on that, but most of our members would say we're tied to the federal minimum wage. And so, we like that. And so $7.25 is the federal minimum wage, and that's the minimum wage here in North Carolina. There was some talk about, fight for 15. Let's try to get $15 minimum wage. Everybody in the restaurant industry today is paying. Maybe not. Somebody's going to find an exception. 15 is the norm. You can't get people to wash dishes for less than that. And there are some exceptions. I'm sure at some quick serve restaurants, they may be paying a little bit less, but largely our wages are significantly higher today than they were pre-COVID. It's irrelevant. And honestly, that has been, that's right. And that's what our industry has always said. We don't need the government to tell us what to pay people. We need to pay them what they're worth and what the market demands we should pay them to keep good people. And that's really been our position.
So this is a question from your perspective and the role that you're in. It's a more general economic question. Mm-hmm. Everybody's looking for people, not just the restaurant industry. Where are these people working is the question I keep asking myself. Do y'all have any idea?
We're asking a lot about that. So what some of the research would show you is that when we laid off 50% of our workforce, many of them went and found jobs in other places. So 50% of the people that we don't have today found jobs in other places. They're working at Publix or retail or in hospitals, medical care, cleaning rooms, whatever it is they do. So they went to other fields. 33% of those have left the workforce. So how does that happen? I think early retirement, some people, we're seeing, I was going to retire anyway, probably go ahead and retire. Or we're seeing young people who are still staying home with mom and dad. So they graduate from college or they finish, and instead of going out and getting a job, somebody's paying for their food and their shelter, and they're just choosing to do other things until so both ends, we're shortening it on both ends. I think a little bit of that. But that's a good question. We're asking a lot of people about that.
So let me follow up on that. In agriculture and construction, we need and are relying upon immigrant folk to do it. Are y'all reaching out to those folks, or are you part of the solution to our overall immigration controversy?
Yes, very much on our radar. You know, we had a good supply of immigrant labor for a long time that kind of helped to fuel our industry, and we do need a solution along that lines. We all celebrated when we got 65,000 new HB2 workers, but, you know, in our industry, if you look at all those other agriculture and home building and construction, and you take that around the country, I mean, that's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. So we do need some sort of immigration reform. It's a very controversial subject, I know. I don't know the answer, but we need workers in order to fuel our businesses. And restaurants and hotels are just two kinds of businesses, construction, agriculture, that you can't automate. We got to have people. We got to have workers. Yes, sir.
No, I'm gonna be easy on you. You mentioned the wages and whatever else. Obviously, a big part of a wait staff are the tips.
Yes.
Now, how are they handled in most restaurants today? You know, as far as the tips are concerned.
It's a big issue around the country, and there's some states who are who have changed their tip wage. And there are some states who are, you know, doing all kinds of things with their tip. We've not had that discussion take place here in North Carolina. It may surprise some of you to know that for table service in North Carolina, you pay $2.13. You pay that employee $2.13, and the tips that they get from employees have to make them up to minimum wage. If they don't get that, then the employer has to make sure they make minimum wage. So they have to make minimum wage, but, you know, currently they make $2.13 an hour, and then the tips on top of that. Most of those employees do quite well. Many of them are in those jobs because they're doing quite well. And in the States, it's been real interesting to see when that topic comes up, the people who fight most against it are the employees and the bartenders. I think I read an article this morning. They don't want to change that tip system. They like that. Works well for them. And with menu prices going up like they have, you know, they're making more today than they've ever made. All right, thank you so much. Good to see you all. Take care.
Thank you so much. We donate a book to the school based on what they've asked. We would ask you to sign it.
Okay, perfect.
So we can share it.
All
So
right,
thank you so much for
okay.
being with us today.
All right.
Before we read our resolution, I would like to thank Charlotte, Courtney, Cheryl, and Farron, and Kelly for joining us today, and would love for you each to come back and spend another week with us at a meeting. Next week, we have Colonel Lou Murray and Colonel Eric Zimmerman to share a veterans message with us. Please do not forget to sign Scott's apron, and Phil, I'll turn it over to you.
I would like to announce that next week we will do a resolution for our good friend Charlie Blanchard, will be next week. But today, the memorial resolution in honor and recognition of Curtis Melvin Kirby Jr. Whereas Curtis Melvin Kirby Jr., known as Kirk, to his family and friends, son of Curtis Melvin Kirby and Ruby Turner Kirby, was born on March 24, 1937 in Roanoke, Virginia, and died on November 29, 2021 at age 84 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Whereas Curtis Melvin Kirby Jr. enlisted in the United States Army, received airborne and ranger training, attended officer candidate school, and served around the world in various positions. He was proud of his military service and enjoyed attending OCS reunions. And whereas following his military service, Curtis Kirby Jr. embarked on a career in commercial real estate and trust management. He eventually retired from Wachovia Bank in Raleigh. And whereas Curtis Melvin Kirby Jr. was the life of the party and enjoyed attending gatherings of friends and family, especially his trips back to Bedford County, Virginia for family reunions. He was an avid golfer, an enthusiastic Virginia Tech Hokies sports fan, and an acclaimed cook. And whereas Curtis Kirby Jr.'s life was characterized by frugality, resourcefulness formed during his humble upbringing, but he was also exceedingly generous with his time, money, and advice. There was no request from his children or grandchildren that he could refuse, as long as they were willing to endure a hefty dose of practical wisdom and advice. Whereas Curtis Kirby Jr. was survived by his wife of 53 years, Charlotte, his brother Tom Kirby, his daughters Charlotte Coltick and Courtney Kirby, 4 grandchildren, and several nieces and nephews. Whereas Curtis Kirby was buried with military honors at Arlington National Cemetery on July 8, 2022. And whereas Curtis Kirby joined the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina in 1995 and was an active, dependable, and valued member for 26 years, regularly attending weekly club meetings and supporting club projects. He received the C.A. Dillon Fellowship Award, the George F. Hickson Fellowship Award, the Carl B. Hyatt Fellowship Award, and the Walter Zeller Fellowship Award. And whereas Curtis Kirby was a loving family man who opened his heart and offered sound advice and counsel to his friends, to his children and grandchildren, and to the members of the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, who recognize him as a suitable role model for any citizen who seeks to make a positive impression among his family and to leave his community a better place than he found it. And whereas the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh desires to recognize, honor, and emulate the life of Curtis Kirby Jr. and the quality of relationships he built, therefore be it resolved that the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina, hereby memorializes the life of a loyal member, Curtis Melvin Kirby Jr., celebrates his career, and commends to all a life well lived and the demonstrated dedication to his family, to his friends, and to his community. Be further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread upon the minutes of the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina, and be it finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be provided to Charlotte to be shared by her with other members of her family as an expression of the affection and respect of the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina, for its member Curtis Kirk Melvin Kirby Jr. Madam President, there you are. I make a motion that we approve this resolution. We'll, if we could rise, we will adjourn with a moment of silent prayer.